Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here from Eastman's Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. And today we're doing an update on moose. Uh, we've previously done a presentation on moose about a year ago, but it's about time that we do another one. So again, there's a bull moose. Again, you remember the male is the bull, the female is known as a cow, and the offspring are known as calves. Moose are basically northern animals. Again, they're found in North America and in Northern Europe and Asia. And Canada actually has the largest moose population. Maine has the most moose here in the contiguous parts of the United States, obviously not as many as Alaska has. Maine actually has about 75,000 moose, considerably more than we have here in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has about 3,000 to 4,000 moose, and Vermont has a little over 2,000 moose. Typical moose range is about 5 to 50 miles for the bulls. It's considerably smaller for the cows. The female moose range is generally 9 to 18 square miles, and this is primarily in the summer. We'll see that in the winter, the range is considerably smaller. So moose in New Hampshire almost disappeared entirely back in the 1800s, and that was due to extensive deforestation, really destroying their habitat. But as the farmlands were abandoned, new forests grew. And in fact, moose actually need young forests in order to flourish. And that's because they need to be able to have plants and trees that are at basically the height that they need to be able to forage. Eastman's forest is very mature now, so maybe newer growth that moose need is less than optimal for them here at Eastman in the current era. The moose population in New Hampshire peaked in the late 1990s at about 7,500, but now it's down to about 4,000. They're more numerous in the northern part of the state, known as the North Country. And moose are the tallest animals in North America, and by mass and body weight, only bisons are actually larger here in North America. A typical adult moose can stand up as high as 7 feet tall at the shoulder. And the males, the bulls, normally weigh between 800 and about 1,500 pounds. Females are smaller. They're typically about 450 to 1,000 pounds. The antlers of a mature bull can be between 4 and 6 feet wide, so they can really be huge. And the coat of the moose has a top layer of long guard hairs and an underlayer of soft woolly fur. The guard hairs are hollow and they're filled with air, and that provides better insulation. And it also helps them stay afloat when they're swimming. Moose are ungulates, they have hooves, and their long legs really allow them to walk through deep snow and to run at very high speeds over rough terrain. They can run up to 35 miles per hour. And they're also excellent swimmers, and we'll see how those hooves actually also help them swim. And they're diurnal, mainly active during the day, although especially at dusk and dawn they may be out. They are active year round. They're usually solitary, particularly the males. The cows may bond with their calves. So what do moose eat? Moose are herbivores, and they can eat up to 70 pounds of plants daily. Their diet consists of non-grass plants and some fruit. Moose are browsers. They feed on the leaves and twigs of trees and shrubs, particularly things like willow, birch, and poplar. Sodium is very important to the moose. And because terrestrial plants are low in sodium, as much as half of the moose's diet actually consists of aquatic plants like lilies and pondweed, which are much lower in energy but very high in sodium content. And in winter and spring, we'll often see the moose at the sides of the roads licking salt that have been spread on the icy roads. So again, they like to browse on things that are at shoulder or neck level. So they actually need a habitat that's got some younger forest rather than a very old forest. Moose lack upper front teeth. They have 6 pairs of large flat molars and 6 pairs of premolars that help them grind up their food. That large nose that they have has nostrils that can be sealed shut when the moose is browsing for aquatic vegetation. And moose are ruminants, meaning they have multiple stomach compartments. And that means they can regurgitate undigested food back up, chew it again before swallowing it again. And that's really helpful in digesting so much cellulose that they have in their diet. And they also make enzymes to help them digest food, but they also rely on enzymes from microorganisms in their GI tract. Moose love aquatic vegetation. Again, aquatic plants, we said, are lower in energy content, but they're much higher in sodium content, which is extremely important to the moose. And the long nose of the moose, with those nostrils that close under the water, allows him to eat aquatic plants that are under the water where other animals cannot reach. So here we're going to see a moose eating some aquatic plants. There, the nose goes down. And there you saw that he picked up some aquatic plants that were under the water. So moose require a habitat that's got adequate edible plants, including pond grasses, young trees, and shrubs, also cover from predators, and protection from extremely hot and cold weather. And they also require access to some sort of mineral licks, safe places for calving, and aquatic feeding sites. So moose will travel along different habitats with the seasons to address those requirements. And as a result, the moose's territory can range from 5 to 50 square miles. Again, smaller square mileage for females. And they have excellent cold tolerance, but very poor heat tolerance. And moose survive the hot weather by accessing shade or a cooling wind, or by immersing themselves in cool water. So in hot weather, moose are often found wading or swimming in lakes or ponds. Moose are very fast. They can run up to 35 miles an hour. Here's a moose running down a ski slope at Jackson Hole. Pretty impressive. They can also run in the water. They can run over rough terrain and they can run in the water. Uh, this video must be an easier way to catch the girl of your dreams. He's going to take off after that cow. Look how those long legs allow him to really jump up off the water. Pretty impressive. So moose are also good swimmers. They can swim up to 6 miles an hour, and they can swim long distances, really up as far as 10 miles. They can also dive up to 20 feet deep and hold their breath underwater for about a minute. Remember, we said that they like to reach some of the aquatic vegetation that's down under the water that other animals cannot reach. And when the weather gets colder, again, they can reach those plants much lower in the water that others can't reach. So here's a bull moose that's swimming. Remember, this moose probably weighs well over 1,000 pounds. And look at him just bob up and down. He's really got some powerful legs with those hooves acting like propellers. So why and how do moose swim? Well, they have at least four good reasons to swim. One is because they feed on aquatic plants. They need to swim to get to the underwater plants. They may need to cross rivers, lakes, or streams looking for food, for a better habitat, or for a mate. They may also swim to escape predators like a pack of wolves. And they often swim just to cool off, so especially during summer heat or during black fly season. They have those long legs that help propel them in the water, and the hooves act like paddles. And they have specialized nasal muscles that close their nostrils when they're underwater. And we mentioned before, they have the hollow guard hairs in their coat that provide not only insulation, but also keep them buoyant when they're in the water. So moose are very heat intolerant. They don't sweat, so they're very heat intolerant. And that's why they're basically a northern species. And moose like to wade in the water on hot days to cool off. And those long legs allow them to wade in moderately deep water, but they can also swim in deep water. And they also will seek shade and cool wind on days that are quite hot if there's no water readily available. So moose have very long legs. We said before, moose can stand up to 6.5 to 7 feet tall. They have very long legs, and the front legs are slightly longer than the rear legs. Long legs help them browse on trees that are higher than other animals can reach, to walk easily in the deep snow, to wade in moderately deep water, and to jump or run over obstacles in order to escape predators, and also helps them swim in deep water. So those long legs really have incredible functions. The moose are ungulates, meaning they have hooves. And note the big dew claws here. So these are dew claws, one on each side here. And those dew claws are very important. So if they're in deep, soft snow or mud, those dew claws may actually touch the ground. And at the same time, their hoofs splay, and that increases the surface area, which helps support the moose's weight, almost like they're wearing snowshoes. Keeps them from sinking. And once again, those big hooves act like paddles when the moose is swimming. Bull moose do have antlers. They can have a huge set of antlers, might be as big as 6 feet wide. And the antlers get bigger each year until the moose reaches its prime. So you can actually tell the relative age of a moose by the size of the antlers. Again, over the summer, they'll have velvet covering those antlers as the antlers are growing. And by September, the velvet dies and falls off. So what's the function of the antlers? Really only fighting for a mate. The antlers do shed at the end of the mating season. So again, the moose's antlers really are mostly for show. They advertise the bull moose to potential mates as the biggest and the strongest. And usually they're just used to scare off rivals who are looking for the same mates. But occasionally, moose do get into battles for mates. So here's a video of two moose actually fighting it out. This is obviously during mating season, and they're fighting over a potential mate. Okay, as we said, the antlers are shed after the mating season. So you might be lucky enough if you're out in the forest to come across some antlers that have been shed in the woods. And by the way, does anybody remember, we've talked about one animal that will sometimes chew on antlers that it finds in the woods? That's right, the porcupine. And the porcupine will chew on those antlers because they have calcium in them. And that's one of the few sources of calcium that the porcupine gets. Okay, and watch this video that was actually taken by a drone. And it captured the very moment that a bull moose was shedding its antlers. So there he's shaking, and there go the antlers. Unbelievably great timing. So if you notice, sometimes the moose has a hump on its back. No, that hump is not for storing fat like a camel's hump does. The hump really is just caused by the massive shoulder muscles that the moose has. The moose also has a dewlap. The dewlap, which hangs down here, is a flap of fur-covered skin that hangs down from the moose's neck. It's more prominent in males than females, and it's sometimes also called a bell. It kind of reminds us of the wattle of a turkey. And the function of the dewlap really is not clear, but some have implicated in both thermoregulation and in courtship. So it must be, moose must get tired standing on those long legs all day long. So sometimes they'll lay down and rest and sleep. So you may encounter a moose bed when you're out in the woods. So there's a moose getting off his feet, kind of lying down in the grass. And that's what you might see if you were out walking in a meadow and you saw something that was this big, a depression like this, typically bigger than what you would see from a deer. That's a moose bed. They also get tired in the winter. Here's a moose that's lying down in the winter. And the thing at the bottom is a moose bed. And one of the ways we can tell that's a moose bed, not only by its size, but we also see some blood tinge. And we'll talk later about the winter tick infestations that moose get that cause considerable bleeding. So, moose reproduction, the rut occurs in September and October. We've just finished the rut season. And again, the rut is when females enter estrus and the moose begin to mate. The bulls will stop eating for 2 weeks during the rutting season, and they'll mate with as many cows as they can find. And both sexes call each other. The females have kind of a wailing call, and the bulls make very deep grunts that could be heard from far away. Some people say as far as 1,600 feet away. And the bulls compete for the females, and they'll often fight other bull mooses with their antlers for dominance in order to claim those females. The gestation period is 8 months. Moose usually bear one calf, but if food is plentiful and the cow has gained enough weight, she may have twins. And again, the calves are usually born in May or June. And the calves have a more reddish coat than the adults do. And those young calves will stay with the mother until just before the next young are born, so almost a year later. You might encounter something in the woods that looks like this. That's what's called a rut pit. Watch this bull moose digging his rut pit. Basically, he will urinate in the pit and he'll spread around the mud. He'll roll in it. He'll cover his body with antlers and scent and pheromones. Pheromones are a very scented type hormone. And this is how they attract female mates. Sorry for that video. And the cows will also roll in the pit. So here he's digging a pit with his front legs. In a minute, he's going to turn around and he's going to urinate in that pit. Okay, he's starting to urinate in the pit. And his urine contains not only the usual things we'd see in urine, but also has pheromones. And those pheromones are very powerful attractants for female moose. This moose must have one incredible bladder. Okay, now he's going to basically use those long legs to mush around that urine and the pheromones in the mud. He's actually going to get down there and he's going to roll in it, even with his covering his body and his antlers with the substances in that bed, and it's attracting a female. So there you see a female, and in fact, there's going to be another female in a minute. And sometimes the cows, the females, will actually also roll in the rut pit. So it's a very powerful part of the mating behavior of the moose. So there you see the cow also laying down in the rut pit. Okay, the moose calves are either single or twins. Remember, we said that if it's a particularly good year for food and the cow has gained enough weight, she may actually have twins. They're usually born in May or June. And note how the coat is much redder than the typical coat of a moose. And again, those calves will stay with the mother until just before the next young are born. So they'll be with the mother for probably about a year. Uh, Here's a calf getting a little bit bigger now, and it's not clear if the mom is feeding the calf something or whether she's grooming that calf. So how long do moose live? Well, the lifespan of the average moose is 15 to 25 years. Really, in the animal kingdom, that's pretty long, much longer than almost all the other animals we see here in New Hampshire and the Upper Valley live. And the absence of predators really contributes to that long lifespan. Really, the only predators of the moose in North America are wolves, and you really have to have a whole pack of wolves. In New England, the moose population has been declining, though, and that's really due to winter ticks and a brain parasite. More on those in a minute. Hunting of moose has been limited in New England due to that declining population. And it takes a moose cow about 7 years to replace herself with offspring, and that's because there's a fairly high mortality of the calves. And once again, that time frame is 5 years longer than it takes a deer to replace herself. So a female moose that's underweight, which usually is due to winter tick infestation, is much less likely to become pregnant. And 70% of calves don't live to a year old because of tick infestations. And so you have higher calf mortality, fewer pregnancies, and that's one of the main reasons for the declining moose population here in New England. So moose do have predators, very few here in New Hampshire and the Upper Valley, but the natural predators of the moose are the wolf. And over in Eurasia, you'd also have the Siberian tiger. But young moose calves can be preyed upon by grizzly bears, cougars, or wolverines. And in some areas, moose are the primary food source for wolves. So wolves may hunt them in packs, with the cow and the calves being the most vulnerable. And of course, humans are predators of the moose, either by hunting or by motor vehicle accidents. So there are two significant factors contributing to the decline of moose in New England. And in the northern parts, they often die from a brain parasite. And deer are the primary vector of that parasite, but the deer are asymptomatic. They're not affected by that parasite. But the moose population and the deer population will be inversely related because of that combination of the deer serving as a vector for the parasite. So what that means is if you have a lot more deer, you're going to have fewer moose. On the other hand, if you have fewer deer, you're going to have more moose. And in the southern parts, moose tend to die from winter tick infestations. But it's the brainworm and the winter ticks that have led to the declining birth rates and increased calf mortality. And of course, moose also die from hunting and motor vehicle accidents. But most of the decline we've seen in the last couple decades has been due to the two infestations, either the brainworm or the winter tick infestations. So moose stay active all winter, but they do reduce their activity, whereas they might have a range of 25 square miles or more during the summer. They reduce that range often to less than a square mile in winter. And because food is less abundant in winter, they tend to lose weight even if they don't get those tick infestations. And they survive the winter by eating whatever is available, things like moss, lichens, sticks, and bark. But moose have several features that help them get through the winter. Those long legs help them walk through deep snow. The hooves and the dew claws also help them walking in the snow. The long nose actually warms the air before it reaches the lungs. Who would have ever thought that a long nose would have that sort of a beneficial effect? And they also have very thick fur that keeps them warm, and those hollow guard hairs provide further insulation. But unfortunately, winter ticks also love to live in that very thick fur. So moose are made for snow. Again, these long legs help them walk through deep snow. And in the snow or mud, those dew claws will touch the ground. And we mentioned the hoof splay, and that increases the surface area so that it supports their weight so they don't sink in the snow or the mud. And it actually acts somewhat like snowshoes would. Okay, now those winter ticks. Winter ticks are really the biggest reason for the declining moose population. They're different from the other types of ticks that affect humans. Tens of thousands of winter ticks may infect a moose. A moose with a high tick load can lose 25 to 30% of their body weight during winter months, mainly because the moose spends a lot of their time standing, scratching, and grooming themselves trying to get rid of the ticks. But they often lose so much blood due to the tick bites that they actually become anemic and malnourished. And warmer, longer falls give the ticks more of an opportunity to latch on before the cold sets in. And this is showing those winter ticks. That's what they look like. They're different again than the typical black-legged ticks that affect deer and white-footed mice. And this is showing, I showed you before, a picture of a deer bed in the snow. I'm sorry, a moose bed in the snow. And again, you can see multiple areas of blood here, and that's from some of the bleeding that was caused by those winter ticks. So again, a moose can harbor anywhere from 35,000 to 70,000 winter ticks. And in some years, more than 50% of the moose calves die in winter due to these infestations. In some years, it may be as high as 70 or 90%. And again, in Maine, in the winter of 2021 to 22, over 90% of the moose calves that were being tracked actually died from those infestations. And the infestations also suppress reproduction in the adult moose. And this is showing a moose cow that's lost a considerable amount of fur due to the due to the winter tick infestation. So again, winter ticks seek out the moose. Usually starting in October, winter ticks begin what's called questing. That's basically searching for a host, and they search in teams of 1,000 or more. They interlock their limbs so that when one tick grabs onto a passerby, they can all climb aboard. So you get not just a single tip, but thousands at a time latch on to the moose. And those ticks really would like any warm-blooded host, but moose are particularly ideal ones. And that's because not only do moose lack a grooming instinct, but they also offer, again, thick 8-inch coat that really keeps those ticks nice and warm. April is known as mortality month for infected moose. And the carcasses in April may be emaciated, nearly bald. They lose almost all their fur, and they might be covered with as many as 70,000 ticks. So again, there are a number of factors that contribute to the high number of winter ticks. Probably the biggest one is high moose density. The more moose you have, the more ticks you're going to have. And early snow melt in late winter or early spring leads to better survival of the engorged ticks. And if you don't have a summer drought, you actually have better survival of the eggs. So it'll be interesting to see. We've had an extended drought this summer, so hopefully there will be fewer winter ticks around, and our moose will do better this year. But if you have a relatively warm fall and early winter temperatures are relatively low and you have relatively little snow, that's going to extend the questing period for those ticks and actually increase tick infestations. Remember, climate change has significantly impacted New Hampshire and New England. We've had 5 to 10 fewer days of snow cover in New Hampshire since 2000, and our winters are warming here faster than other parts of the United States. So it's no surprise that the winter ticks would be increasing here in New England. So again, current attempts to reduce winter ticks have really been futile. There are several possible approaches. Some people have looked at pesticides. Others have looked at biopesticides like various fungal pathogens. Others have looked at genetic engineering and creating more habitat so that you have reduced the number of moose per square mile would make sense. And again, hunting to cull the moose population probably has been the most successful strategy. So the theory for culling is that Moose during breeding season, which coincides with that winter tick questing, if you have more moose that are getting together, that increases the chance that ticks will jump from one moose to another moose. So if you hunt and reduce the moose population, that reduces the winter tick population. So a couple of years ago, there were actually a little bit of good news in Maine. In 2024, the winter ticks were at one of the lowest levels in the last 11 years that Maine has been tracking moose with winter ticks. And it was the second year in a row that the tick counts on moose were relatively low. The Maine Department of Fisheries and Wildlife puts radio collars on young moose, usually ones that are less than 12 months old. So basically calves. They've been doing that since 2014. And they take blood and hair samples and look for winter ticks and examine the overall health of the animals. And Maine's moose population actually has been quite stable for about the last 10 years. But in that year, the moose's calves were bigger than usual, and that was attributed to fewer winter ticks and them also being a little bit more active due to less snow. Being heavier gives the calves a better chance of surviving. But here's the kicker: more moose means more ticks. So again, this really shows the winter tick conundrum. So if you have lots of moose, okay, that also means you're going to have more winter ticks. And if you have more winter ticks, the newborn calves are going to be underweight, and not as many are going to survive their first 3 weeks of life. And in fact, only less than 50% will make it to their first birthday. On the other hand, if you have a lower population of moose, that means less ticks. And having less ticks means that the newborn calves are more likely to survive those first 3 weeks. They're more likely to survive to the end of the first year. In fact, up to 85% may survive. And you also have higher reproductive rates in the adult moose. So again, it's a conundrum. Okay, here at Eastman, we have a video here of a moose taken by Rick Garish. So the moose is taking a leisurely stroll, maybe looking for a swim in the lake. Pretty impressive. Uh, we probably have a moose sighting at Eastman at least once a year. Uh, when I first moved here to Eastman 11 years ago, we had a moose in our yard in September. And as we were preparing our first presentation on moose a year ago, I was really lamenting the fact that I had not seen another moose since that time. And then all of a sudden, we caught this on our game cam. So big bull moose, that was in September of 2024. It was great timing. So again, moose, again, typically have a brownish gray coloration, but occasionally you might see a white moose. A true albino moose would have red eyes and a bunch of health problems. But a similar white moose was seen recently in the Green Mountains of Vermont, and they have what's called leucism. That's a rare genetic condition that causes a partial loss of pigmentation, and it causes them to have a cream or white colored coat, but they keep their normal eye color and normal hoof color, so they're not true albinos. So here you see that moose. Again, this is in Vermont, actually out crossing the road. And there's a picture of a real white moose. But if you notice, he doesn't have pink eyes. So he's not a true albino. So where are you most likely to see a moose? Well, you're most likely to see them at the edge of wetlands, ponds, lakes, or streams. Remember, moose like to eat aquatic plants. And on a hot day, you might see one cooling off in the water. You might also see them at roadsides, particularly licking the salt that have been spread on the roads over the winter. Remember, we said that they really need sodium, and they often get sodium by licking the salt at the sides of the roads. And you might also see them when you're hiking out in the woods. You're actually more likely to see a moose in the northern parts of New Hampshire. You know the rule of thumb. If you're out hiking, what do you do if you actually encounter an animal? Well, Eco Explorer website suggests you use the rule of thumb. And essentially, what that means is that you hold your arm out, put your thumb between you and the animal, and if you can't fully block out the animal, you're too close. Okay, that's pretty good recommendation. So moose in our midst. So if you actually haven't seen a moose here at Eastman, how do you know that one has been here? Well, you can tell by their tracks, by the scat that they leave, by rubs on trees, by signs of browse on the trees, a moose bed that you might see in the grass or the snow, a rut pit, or antlers that were shed in the woods. So moose tracks, what do they look like? Moose tracks, again, are the largest of all the ungulates. So again, here you see the moose tracks on the far left. Deer tracks would be here. Um, Deer tracks are much more likely to have dew claws show. Remember, we said that they're very big dew claws on the moose, but they're up relatively high, so they usually don't show in the mud. And the deer tracks tend to be a little bit more curved. See the curve to the deer tracks compared to the moose tracks. So here's typical moose track. And again, here we don't see a dew claw. Here's some moose tracks in the snow. And remember that video I showed you of a moose here at Eastman just last September? This was actually the hoof print that he left in the sand or gravelly kind of soil. And here I can't quite make out if this could be a dew claw back here. But that's the track that was left here last year. Moose scat, again, appears as firm, dark pellets. They're about twice the size of deer pellets and about 4 times the size of rabbit pellets. And the bottom here shows a cut section, and it looks almost like sawdust in here. And that's not really surprising because in winter, the moose has primarily a woody diet. So that's what the inside of a moose pellet would look like. But keep in mind that moose, particularly if they're eating a lot of aquatic plants, may also leave patties rather than the typical pellets. So again, this is just showing moose scat compared to deer scat. Here's deer scat on the left, and the moose scat is considerably bigger. It's at least twice the size of the deer scat. Moose rubs are left on trees, and both bull moose and moose cows can leave rubs on the trees, probably primarily for scent marking for mating purposes. The bull moose leaves the rubs with their antlers, but the cows make their rubs with their teeth. So again, this one is actually showing this is a balsam fir, and you can see these rubs that are left here were left by a moose cow using her teeth. Moose browse, remember we said that moose browse on leaves, twigs, buds, and bark. And because they don't have upper incisors like rodents have, they don't make clean cuts. Basically, all their cuts in the browse are very ragged. Remember, we said deer also leave kind of a ragged pattern to their browse. But again, the browse of the moose is often at the level of the moose head or neck, which might be 6 or 7 feet off the ground. So typically you're going to see this browse much higher than you would see browse from deers. Okay, how about moose and humans? Well, moose seldom attack humans, but they might be aggressive if they're provoked or frightened, particularly during the rut. When they're harassed or startled by people or in the presence of a dog, they might actually charge. And unlike other large hoofed animals like horses, moose can kick in all directions, including sideways. So you could get severely injured if you were in a interaction with a moose. And we've all seen the videos of that moose running down the ski hill after a skier. But moose often show aggression to other animals as well, particularly predators. Okay, in Alaska, you're actually more likely to be injured by a moose than a bear. And that's because in Alaska, moose outnumber bears 3 to 1, and they injure people, usually 5 to 10 people annually, mostly in motor vehicle accidents. So if you're threatened by a moose, run and get behind something solid like a tree. Uh, Moose are usually docile. They're usually not a threat, but beware they could harm you, and beware of the season. Back in when I first moved here in September of 2014, a female moose passed right through our yard. So I ran outside of the house trying to get a video or photo of the moose as she crossed onto the golf course. And suddenly I remembered it was the rut season. So I was worried that she might be running from a bull moose. So I kind of hightailed it back into the house. Fortunately, no bull moose showed up at that time. But if you do see a moose, know what to do. If you do see a moose, the New York Times had a great article on what to do. So you can click on that link to find out. But basically, there are signs that a moose might attack. His ears might be down against his head. The hair might be up on the back and his neck. His eyes might be bulging, and his tongue might be out and licking his lips. That's actually how they collect scent, and that's actually the most ominous sign. So if you do see a moose, particularly if he's doing those behaviors, get behind a tree or a rock or some other sort of obstruction. And if you fall to the ground, curl up in a ball and protect your head with your hands and hold very still. Don't try to get to move or get up until the moose has moved a safe distance away because it might renew its attack. Moose and motor vehicles. Well, there were 45 collisions between moose and motor vehicles here in New Hampshire in 2023. I don't have the statistics from the last 2 years. Over the last 5 years, the state's averaged about 68 collisions between moose and motor vehicles annually. Actually, prior to 2020, there were almost 100 collisions per year. And moose, as we mentioned, often come to the sides of roads to lick salt, so they may be out there. And because the mooses stand so tall, serious injury or death often happens to the occupants of the motor vehicle. Actually, uh, moose are much more likely to injure or seriously injure the occupant of a motor vehicle 13 times more likely than collisions with deer. So those moose were pretty darn close to being hit by that motor vehicle. New Hampshire Fish and Game says several things. Again, obviously, moose can collide with motor vehicles on almost any statewide road, any type of road. And most moose collisions occur from May through October. Remember, they especially like to lick the side of the road to lick salt. So they may be out there in the spring after the snow is melted. And they're actually much more likely to cross roadways during the rut. Remember, we said that the rut or the mating season occurs from September to October. And in many states in New England, the vast majority of the moose motor vehicle collisions actually happen during the rut. And though collisions can happen any time of day, they're most likely to occur at dusk and dawn, right, at nighttime. And moose are dark brown, so it's hard to see them against the pavement, particularly at nighttime. And don't depend on eye shine. Remember, we usually can see deer because they actually look at the headlights and we'll see a reflection from their eyes. But moose don't tend to do that. They're usually not looking at an approaching vehicle, so you're very unlikely to see the shine in their eyes. So again, moose crossing signs in New Hampshire just indicate where moose have crossed in the past. So you need to be particularly attentive and drive slowly where you see those signs. But remember, a moose is going to cross the road wherever they like. There's no guarantee that they'll only cross at designated moose sightings. And they're more likely to cross roadways during the rut. So again, during September and October. And moose often come to the sides of the road to lick salt, particularly in the spring. So break for moose, it could save your life. This is a bumper sticker that's out there. New Hampshire Fish and Game has these recommendations for drivers to reduce your chance of a collision with moose or the severity of injury to the occupant. You should not drive at high speeds. Try to drive at 55 miles or less when moose might be out. Wear your seatbelt. Scan the sides of the roads as you're driving, and you need to be able to stop within the zone of your headlights. So use high beams wherever possible to increase the likelihood to spot a moose. And if you do see a moose, slow down or stop if necessary, and wait until you've passed it or it's actually left the road. And don't count on the moose stopping when they see you. They're very unpredictable. Stop the car if necessary and wait till the moose is gone. So also keep in mind moose hunting. Hunting season in New Hampshire is, well, last year it was from October 19th to the 27th. And only those hunters who won a special lottery can actually hunt moose. So we caution hikers that are out during September and October, wear blaze orange when you're hiking during moose hunting season. Moose in the future. We're actually less likely to see moose in the future here in New Hampshire. Climate change is going to be the biggest factor. It's going to cause some northward migration to colder regions of the moose, and higher temperatures may also reduce the reproductive success of moose who are very heat intolerant. And particularly the older moose, who are the primary maters, are very heat intolerant. And the winter tick problem is likely to worsen as climate change causes shorter winters. But keep in mind that if we do have periods of prolonged drought, like we had this past summer, that could conceivably reduce the winter tick population. But shorter winters also mean there are going to be more white-tailed deer, and that means there's going to be more opportunity for the moose to become infected with the brain parasites that are actually carried by the white-tailed deer. And once again, habitat infringement by human developments also certainly produces a role in our declining moose population. So hopefully that moose on your license plate won't be the last one that you see. We're really going to miss seeing this very majestic animal. So that's a bit about moose. We hope that you've enjoyed this and come back.